Hello and welcome to Generational Archives again, the show where we connect, heal, uncover through intergenerational conversations and archival research. I'm Dr. Raina León. I am today recording from my youngest child's nursery, and I'm with my mother, Dr. Norma D. Thomas. Mommy, how are you going to introduce yourself today?
Grandmom.
Okay, grandmom
I'm
it is.
Grandmom BB today.
Yep, surrounded by artifacts. And that's our theme for today. We're actually talking about the archives that aren't documents, the things that we receive that are handmade, that are the quilts, the crocheted blankets, the baby blankets, the graduation gowns, all of those things that have a story connected to them and that need to be told. And so we're actually going to describe some of the quilts that were passed down to me or crocheted or knitted items that my children have been wrapped in, but also me and my brother along the way. So, but before we do that, we always have some sort of check in question. I think that what I want to focus on is, let's see. Oh, what is a good check-in question today, Mommy? Well, we did something different today. We went on a walk today, and I think that the check-in question might be about who and how are you taking care of yourself for the future?
The only reason I laugh is that you saw an AARP article that said the things that you should do to live a long life, and you looked at me and said you're not doing any of them. So, walking would be one because I
Mm-hmm.
used to be a walker. I used to be a fanatical exerciser, so I need to get back to that. The simple one was taking a multivitamin, which I did go out and buy, so I could at least have one thing to check off on the list. So we do need to all spend time taking care of ourselves. We wind up taking care of other people, but you can't take care of other people if you don't take care of yourself first. And
Yeah.
so that's why it's not selfish to take care of yourself first.
Yep. One thing that we did today was go on a walk together just to the pharmacy. No big deal, but that little quarter-mile walk had both of us a little breathless. I will have to say that I have good reason. I just had a C-section. I'm still recovering. And I was not as active in the last few weeks of my pregnancy because I was high risk and had a whole bunch of health things that emerged. But
And I have to prepare to for a long walk that I do
yes.
every year as part of, well, now it's part of the Juneteenth celebration in town, but it's a walking tour of the historic East End of Uniontown. So I have to get in shape.
Yep. So every day we're committing to doing this walk as part of a fundraising effort for a school in Kenya. We're on the board for Daraja Academy. It does incredible work with girls' education in Kenya. And so every day we're walking towards our 10K goal and helping the future of that school and the students there, but also helping our own bodies and minds. So let's shift back into this idea of the archive beyond the dark document. So we've talked a lot about how people can research and find their people through going to the courthouse and looking at deeds and exploring birth certificates and death certificates and census records, interviewing people, going into photographs and asking folks who might be depicted within there to identify other folks there. There's so many different strategies for looking at the paper document and recovering some of those ancestral stories. But there are also the things that we inherit or have received in some way that have their own stories that are connected deeply to people, but you have to have the item, describe the item, and actually have someone recount who it was, what was the impetus behind the creation of that thing.
Well, and I think that's the one important thing, that some of these items, as I was saying, I know that they were that they were, this is crocheting, right? They were
Yeah.
crocheted for you, but at least for one of these, I'm now struggling to remember who did the crocheting.
Yeah.
So it says how you should somehow write down something, maybe put a label inside of it,
Yeah.
because over time you may forget who actually did this and the why behind it. So
Yeah.
probably a good idea to do some sort of label.
So I've taken pictures of all of them. Many of them are on Instagram already and tagged to Storyjoy Inc., our IG, as well as mine, Raina León, on IG. So we're going to describe some of them and then talk about who the people are or were who created them, why they were created, and I think it's really poignant that we're in my son's nursery while we do this, as they were all assembled here so that they can be used along the way. The first one that I'll actually point to is on my wall, which wasn't made by anyone else other than me. I made it a long time ago, just when it's a quilt with all these different patterns in the kind of a brown and warm toned connective like color palette, and it's a log cabin formation, which I learned from El Teresa Church, who is a literary mother of mine from the Carolina African American Writers Collective, an incredible artist, quilter, and poet and writer. And she did a workshop with some of the collective folks on this pattern, which is super approachable to do. And yeah, it's wonky. It's wonky. It's not perfectly like straight anywhere. It's my first like big quilt. Mommy, you say you don't remember it, but you actually finished this because
I thought it was another one
no,
I finished.
you finished two of them. This one you finished, and then the other one too.
And it's the other one that we haven't located.
Yeah, that one. There's one that I did that had been hanging around forever.
Yes,
because it was massive.
And you went to Europe, and
Yeah.
I decided to finish it.
Yep.
And hand sew it, and so that's the one that it would be nice to find.
Yeah, it's around somewhere. But this one I loved because it was one that I was making at a time that I was like starting to think about having kids. Now this was over a decade ago, but it took me a while to want children in my life as a mother, and so it's significant that it's on the wall in this space.
Well, a couple of these quilts that I know who made them. This one is a quilt, and it was made for your brother.
It's blue and white squares.
Yeah, blue and white triangles and squares.
Mm-hmm.
And the same person did this one for you. That's when no one knew what the sex of the baby was going to be. Mm-hmm. So maybe this was made after Dito was born. But this one is blue and white and pink.
Yes.
Just to cover the bases. This one is crocheted.
Mm-hmm.
These were made by my supervisor boss at the time at Delaware County Services for the Aging, Barbara White, and she made these for in honor of you all's birth. So I know that that's the person, and she's since deceased. Mm-hmm. So these are very, very, very precious. This one was made by someone for you at the same time period, and the reason I say things should be labeled is, for the life of me, I don't know who made this beautiful, also white, blue, and pink.
Kind of in the chevron pattern, and it's a really sizable quilt. It's actually like bigger than just like an infant quilt, so something that little ones, the toddler, could still be using.
Yeah, so it was made at that time. This one is small, but very intricate flowers.
Mm-hmm. It's a blue and pink and green stem flowers, and they're kind of three-dimensional, actually.
Yeah, so this one is very, very beautiful. This was made by a co-worker as well, and Barbara is her first name, and of course now I'm struggling for her last name. I'm going to have to go find her last name, but she worked with me, for me, at first Delaware County Office on Services for the Aging, then went to Senior Community Services, then went to work at Delaware County Memorial Hospital. So I can remember all that.
She remembers the whole career. Can't remember her last name.
This was actually made by her mother.
Oh, okay.
And her mother is also now deceased. And this is just a beautiful piece of work. That's where, you know, all of them are beautiful, but this one is so pretty, and you know it took such a long time.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. I there's a red sweater that a coworker of mine, Dr. Mary Marigosa, her mother made for my first son, Rafael. And I'm noticing that it's actually not hung up in the closet. So
I remember that sweater too.
Yeah, it's really beloved. So I have to look for that in the bins that have some more precious items in them, the baptismal gowns, for example.
Yes, I asked Raina if she had her first communion dress, and of course she does. She has her brother's baptismal outfit because he's not a keeper of anything. So Raina's a keeper of all things. So she has those. It brought up, I also, not here, but at my house, have a quilt that was made by my Aunt Mame that is very, very colorful. Yeah. So her hands were gnawed by arthritis, but she was able to knit and crochet. Mommy tried to teach me how to do that, and I never had the patience, because if you miss something and you have to tear it out, that's kind of the end of it for me. So I did learn to knit. I actually knitted a hat. I taught myself to knit and then never did it again. But my youngest two sisters can knit and crochet because they did get the lesson. The rest of us did not take that lesson. My mother could sew. She could do all those things.
Yeah, it's funny. She taught Crystal, so my older cousin, who's about 7 years older than me, and Crystal taught me to knit. I think she tried to teach me how to crochet, but that never stuck. And I learned as a kid, maybe like first, second grade, how to knit, and I would be knitting in school, and I would get in trouble for that. But I'm also thinking about what you said about Aunt Mame, and that particular crocheted blanket, because we loved that thing growing up. And it's beautiful, this rainbow colored, multicolored, and we, in our house in Southwest Philly, entering into the house, there was this banister, and my brother and I would loop it around, so we would create like this little kind of hollow with a net with a blanket from Aunt Mame, and like jump into it and kind of create this little swing. Now there are all these
which now says to me why occasionally I had to repair it.
Yes. Oh, it was so lovely, like this invention of looping this quilt around the irons, around the loops of the balustrade there. And like no, because we only did it when you were not there, like because there's no way you will allowed us to do this.
No, not to that.
You had to repair it on occasion. I think you like knew that what we were doing when you came home, like you had seen us do this, and we got into trouble a lot because of it. But we loved like being totally cocooned in this blanket. And of course, we had no context of the effort that had gone into making it. But
yeah, because it's very, very beautiful, and I still have it. Yeah. I have one that was made from one of my sorority sisters, so it's a pink blanket. So that's at my house, and I have a yellow one that my mother did not make, but I was there when she won it. She won it at a National Association of Black Social Workers, the chapter in Pittsburgh. She won it at one of their fundraisers, and because she was a chapter member, they wanted her to give it back. Needless to say, it went home in the car.
That's funny. That's funny.
I still have that one too.
Well, and I'm looking around, like there's this one blanket that I have that is, it looks like it's crochet, but it's the most intricate pattern. It's double layered. and they're interwoven with one another, this red and green. And this one actually was a baby blanket made for my husband in Italy by his great aunt. And because I was like, this isn't one, it's actually one that my mother in law had given to us for our son or, when he was born, our oldest. And then there are these quilts that my friends or literary mothers have made for me. One is this blue and brown that's more like a swaddle than it is a blanket, because my friend who's a crocheter and knitter was like, this is a little bit safer for babies these days, so she made this kind of swaddle for him, my oldest. um, and I have two white blankets, one made by a poet in Chicago, Kelly Norman Ellis, and another made by El Teresa Church, Dr. Church, who I mentioned previously, both crocheted blankets. And one that my mom actually won at the East End United Community Center, which is this knit yellow and blue and orange.
Actually, that one was at Senior Community Services.
Oh, okay.
They had a gala, and I walked in, and there's his basket, and I said, oh, this is actually, you were pregnant with Raffaele.
Yep.
Because I said you wanted to take all the stuff that was in the blanket basket back to California. And I said, how are you going to do that? And you managed to figure out how to get it all.
I figured it all out. I put it into my suitcase, and it made its way back. But there are among these artifacts, among these blankets, beautiful pieces that we don't recall how they came to us, to me, and yet you can see the love in them, right? So in this episode, we encourage you to consider looking at what you've received, inherited, been gifted, and recounting, sharing with others the names of those who made them for you, who loved you through them. And perhaps in your life you actually never received them. Maybe your story is that you were adopted, or unfortunately there might have been a fire, or things have been lost along the way. Maybe you have been traveled from one place to another for any number of reasons. And even recounting what was lost can bring back what was treasured. And that's important to share that story too. There are so many of us who have lost so many things, and because of the grief of it, don't want to share that story, and that can feel like a continual devastation to the generations to come.
Well, and I would also mention a very lovely quilt that was donated to the soon-to-be Fayette County African American History Museum by my cousin, who is this amazing creative person with quilts and plants and you name it, she can make it. Purses and she makes everything out of everything. And so she donated this quilt that some of the panels are from her grandfather's old shirt. And she has it labeled so that we know where it came from. We know her grandfather's shirt. We know, information about that quilt. So it's hanging up right now in the museum. So all these things are very, very, very important to remember those stories, remember the people who gave them to us, and to preserve them so we can pass on that history, because history is more than just paper and pencil, and it's the stories. It's the stories.
And the last thing that I'll add to that is that, especially for femme-identified folk, oftentimes we're, at least historically, not recounted as closely within the records, within the written records, with the census things and deeds and so on, because of power, because of money, because of gender and misogyny and so on. And yet we are scripted into the weaving, scripted into the making of things, and indelible there, but the story has to be told. So as we close, want to encourage you to again look at those things that hold stories that may not be written down, and to share those with those you love. Record them, write the story that was previously unwritten. And I I will close too with saying, yes, this is my home. You are in the nursery, and you may hear a background sound of the dog rustling and the baby gurgling and all of that. And that too is a part of the joy of this podcast, that it is a piece of home. Anything that you want to close with?
No, I
All
think
right.
that's, except I'm now holding this newborn
Yes.
baby because I could hear him rustling in the other room. We had put him down a little too long.
No, he was like, I gotta be a part of this recording.
So I
These are
had to
my
go-
blankets.
I had to run and go get him.
Yep. So, if you like and subscribe, share the news with others. You can support us on Patreon. You can support us on YouTube, and continue to follow us, and also follow your own path to reclaiming your ancestors. Bye for now.
Bye.